Hey everyone, and welcome back to my week 3 progress report. So in today's video, I really am going to be focusing in on sharing a lot about my training over the last few months and then what I'm currently doing with my training program now. But before we get into it, maybe let's just take a step back and review how I'm tracking along towards my goals. So obviously last week was my birthday, so I've had a lot of fun, a lot of social events. We went out for a lovely walk, but obviously it has meant that my nutrition has been a little bit more lax, which is totally fine. I definitely noticed that I was feeling a lot more hungry over the weekend. So jumping on the scales this week, I'm still weighing in at my lightest weight, which is 67.7. I don't really anticipate to see it change too much this week because I'll be absolutely honest, I haven't really been focusing too much on the nutrition aspect. But if I can stabilize my week and treat this week as a little bit more as a diet break, just to get a few more energy stores back in, I'll probably re-hit my deficit again next week. So tracking along there with fun. I got a cross stitch for my birthday, so I'm looking forward to taking a step back and doing that as a little bit of a mindfulness activity. And I definitely think stress is better, and my step count is up as well. So still hitting around 15,000 steps per day. But this week I really did want to focus in on what I've been doing with my training. So obviously I am currently almost 9 months postpartum and I've been back training since 6 weeks. When I first returned back to the gym, I was doing maybe 20 to 30 minute workouts. So the load was quite light. The density of the session was also light, and I built myself up nice and slowly. Then moving into, I guess, when I was around 12 weeks to 3 months postpartum, from 3 months to 6 months postpartum, I really did use that time as a chance to push myself in the gym. I was doing 5 sessions a week, and I would probably say that those sessions were very much focused on hypertrophy. And when I talk about hypertrophy training, I'm talking about training within that sort of 8 to 12 rep window. It's a fairly stereotypical bodybuilding approach style of training. And there's definitely some distinct benefits of training in that rep scheme. So when it comes to training for muscle hypertrophy, or if you're training again in that sort of 8 even to 20 rep range, it's a great way to be targeting specific areas of the body. So in coming back postpartum, obviously it was a focus to be rebuilding core strength, rebuilding hip stability. You can really do a lot of great accessory exercises and isolation work to be strengthening up different parts of the body. It's also a great way to be working really hard, which is great for fat loss. And it's also great in terms of rebuilding muscle mass as well. So stereotypically training for muscle hypertrophy, it's a great way to be actually putting on muscle size. Obviously from being pregnant, that is something that I definitely felt dropped or went away in the fact that I was training differently when I was pregnant. I wasn't probably training as hard, and therefore I did lose a little bit of my muscle size. So over the last sort of 3 to 4 months, a big goal of mine has been to rebuild my shoulders, rebuild the shape of my glutes, rebuild my legs, so that you really can see that I've got some nice big muscles there. Now obviously when it comes to actually getting defined or toned muscles, that really does come from actually fat loss. So again, training for hypertrophy is a great way to be building muscle size, increasing the size of your muscle fibers, but you also want to be focusing in on your nutrition so you're not looking bulky. So that's kind of a little bit what I've been doing with my training. But one thing I was doing specifically is as I was progressing, I was increasing the volume of my sessions. When we talk about volume training or high volume training, or let's just say when we're talking about volume training specifically, we're talking about the dosage of your work. So generally volume is expressed by reps multiplied by sets, multiplied by the weight that you're actually lifting. So it's one of those variables that you can manipulate to be changing the dose of your training. When it comes to getting results from your training, results come from the stress, so the dosage, how much you're actually working and what kind of stress response you're creating. Then we have the recovery phase. So remembering that when we're recovering, that's when we are laying down and resynthesizing new muscle tissue. And then we see the adaptation that happens thereafter. So an increase in muscle size means that hopefully you are getting stronger and you can tolerate more work. So obviously to continue to progress, sometimes you need to change different variables. So for me, over the last few months, the variable that I've been really focusing in on is increasing the volume. And that's a great way to be training, because as you get stronger and as your body starts to tolerate more workload, you can really increase the density of your sessions by basically doing more work. So I would say that I went from, when I was early postpartum hitting sort of 3 sets to then working upwards of 5 sets in that kind of this using stimulating reps. So or my working set. So I generally don't include my warm-up as I don't include my warm-up reps or sets in the amount of work that I've been doing. So stereotypically, as I said, I've been training 5 times a week, which is quite a high volume number of strength sessions to be doing anyway. But in the sessions themselves, usually 5 to 6 exercises of either 4 to 5 sets, and again hitting that 8 to 12 reps. So if I'm to multiply my volume for those sessions, if I'm doing 6 exercises, and as I said, I'm doing 5 or 4 sets of each of around that 8 rep mark, you can quite easily multiply it out. If I was to say, 10 reps on average, 10 times 4, that's 40, that's a volume of 40, and then obviously I've got to multiply the load in there, and that's per exercise. So it's quite a lot of volume. Now, training like that is a great way, as I said, to be really encouraging maybe lagging body parts. You can isolate. It's a great way to be encouraging fat loss because it's quite a metabolic way to train as well. So you generally might burn a few extra calories. But obviously there is a big limiting factor there, that there's only so much work you can do before you end up overshooting and you're not able to then recover before your next workout. And the way that I was splitting my workouts is that, again, a big focus for me was reshaping back my glutes and getting my glutes nice and strong. So I was doing 3 lower body sessions a week, 2 upper body, with a big focus on glute development. So as I was saying, a big limiting factor there is actually getting enough recovery in. So in the last few weeks before changing my program, I was definitely finding, because the weights had really started to build on the bar, my deadlifts, I was over the triple digits, my back squats coming along, I was actually finding that then going into the next session, even if I had a day in between my heavy days, I was finding that I was still feeling really fatigued, and that fatigue sometimes can be actually muscle soreness from inflammation that's caused by the stress of the exercises, and that's a normal response. Inflammation, you're straining your muscles, you're purposely creating a stress so that they adapt and they get stronger. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I was also feeling quite a lot of central nervous system fatigue, which is where your body might not necessarily feel sore, but it's really hard to get your workload up. And I was finding that I kind of knew that in training like that, when I was already had quite a substantial amount of central nervous system fatigue, that the amount of stimulating reps that I was able to do in that next workout was a lot less. And when I'm talking about stimulating reps, if you're, say, working in an 8 to 12 rep mark my words, those first few reps that you do, they're not actually stimulating reps. They're not really they're not really going to be those reps that are actually going to force the adaptation. It's towards the back end of the set, or towards the back end of the multiple sets that you're doing, that is actually going to be providing the workload, the stimulating reps, that is actually going to force the adaptation. So if you're finding that you're super fatigued, it's actually really hard to get yourself into that zone. So in moving forward, I did come to the end of my training block. I sat down and I really refocused back in on what is my training goals, and my training goals is to get stronger. So it's really important that you're focusing in on individualization, focusing in on your own training and specification to actually make sure your training matches whatever it is that your goal is. Now, obviously for the girls that come in into 23W and you're training within a group, for the vast majority of us, we've set your program based on the fact that you're coming back post-ISO. So you need to be doing your isolation work. You need to be doing your stability work. You need to be doing your mobility work. Unless you've had, a good 6 months of consistent weight training under your belt. And I guarantee, even if you've been doing workouts at home, they haven't included the intensity or the load that really would be considered enough consistency in your training. So in reworking my program again, I have redeveloped it so that it is a much more powerlifting focused training. It is very much focused on strength rather than muscle hypertrophy. So in this session, I've cut down the number of exercises I'm doing to just 3, and my working sets is only going to be 3 as well, and my reps are hitting for this week's, for the next few weeks, we're hitting 5 reps. So if I'm working at the actual volume, reps versus sets, for one exercise, it's going to be a working volume of 15, which is a lot less than the 40 per exercise that I was doing in previous weeks. But what has changed is the intensity. So obviously my load is going to be staying up. This week I was hitting 105 on my deadlifts for 5, 30 on my overhead press, 55 on my bench, and 80 on my back squat. And as I said, I'm only going to be training 3 days because I need that recovery time in between my sessions to be making sure that then I can turn up to my next training session in a few days' time, making sure that I'm relatively fatigue free. So I can be really training at my best. And if I'm training at my best, I can perform at my best, and therefore I can lift as much. So really the focus of this next training block is going to be increasing the amount of weight that I am lifting. And then the other part, I guess, that I haven't taken into consideration is that being that I'm a PT and that I'm a coach, I am moving lots anyway. So I'm not too worried about the fat loss part of my training, because as I said, my steps are up. I'm easily hitting 15,000 steps. And when it comes to my accessory and mobility work, I'm still doing all that stuff anyway. I'm coaching a couple of Pilates sessions a week, and I'll probably still throw in a couple of accessory days where maybe I'm working arms or core or glutes specifically. So, but I'm not going to be considering them as my work. More so just supporting work and really focusing in on mobility as well. So that's what I'm kind of doing with my training at the moment. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that goes and how I go from a recovery point of view. From a mental point of view, it can be really hard when you're so used to training every single day to then pulling back and just really focusing on the efficiency of your workout and making sure you're training at your best 3 times a week. So it's going to be a great little mental test for me. But I'm looking forward to it. So I'm going to wrap it up there. If you enjoyed this video and you like learning about the science of getting stronger or body recomp, I'm going to be filming another video in the coming days to really focus in on the difference between hypertrophy and strength training, what sort of changes you can expect in your muscles, the rep ranges, maybe the benefits as well of different types of training. So I hope you enjoyed this week's progress report. I can't wait to jump on next week and share with you how I'm going. Have a great weekend. Bye.